let me hand things over to Mr. Aidan Shaffer. I do not have an introduction for him, but Aidan has been, you've been with the conference forever. Aidan works closely with Mark. He's been working on, my introduction would be Aidan Shaffer has been working on crop circle. And here, I'm going to spotlight you for everyone. Put it on speaker view.
All right.
Okay. Let's see. Can you guys see the presentation?
Yeah, and I would say that Aidan, you've been with the conference for forever. Yeah.
Dr. Vallone sent me an email, I guess December 2020. Very, it was still like single-digit APEC conferences, and said, here, join the Zoom meeting, since he knows that I've been researching flying saucers and such. So I'm going to go. This is going to be based off of my artistic talent. Of if you know anything about artists, we're always looking into symbols and trying to see a connection between, what is this, like, heaven forbid, the swastika, spinning wheel, pinwheel. What is that? Has that been represented in other languages and other cultures over the centuries? And you find that there's these certain designs or patterns that appear, and you can intuit something from that. So just to, I am an experiencer. I'll get at the end of my presentation, we'll get to that experience, and during which I carry a rare form of Tibetan yoga. If you know anything about Vajrayana Buddhism, or like have gone into the meditations, it's all about doing internal visualizations and tapping into the mind's ability to see. So from there, like after my experience, I started looking into crop circles more seriously, because I'd finally seen some vehicles, and I was like, oh, well, there's proof. There is something else out there. And from there, I started looking for similarities and such. So this element, this symbol appeared in 2010. Why I have little skinny Bob there is that the alien icon, which you can see is also on the shirt, is represented a couple times in different crop circles. But the thing that's most important about this one is focusing down at the bottom and the bar with 3 dots. And that bar with 3 dots is going to show up in a couple different crop circles, which will be here in the next couple slides. But for the longest time, I'm like, well, what is it getting at? What are they like? To me, I instantly got the idea that, like, that bar and 3 dots, that's fuel. And for a while, just a couple of years bashing my head on the ground or thinking about it, and I kind of came up to the resting conclusion that it represents the strong nuclear force. You have the 3 quarks and the gluon force. So hypothetically, they're working with the strong nuclear force in order to create their spinning fields. A little bit later, came across Bob Grenier and during one of these APEC presentations, and in one of his slides, he showed the magnetic monopoles, or the magnetic imprint of the ion eaters as they were going through material samples, and he called it like a little bird mark. And so that instantly brought up this overall shape of what you see here in this slide. I've used some CAD. You have on the left, or it's my screen left, but it's a 3/4 view and then basically a head-on view. So I think that they're within the power system. They're working with these the ion eaters, and that sort these exotic vacuum objects. So this one is, when I saw it, immediately thought that it was a flight reactor. Again, you can see that they're using that magnetic monopole structure. And if there's anybody with a better descriptor for it, the ion eaters are also called plasmoids. But here on the outer branches, you can see again that, this is the bar and 3 dots. This circle was made in 2009. The one that I call the fuel element key was given a year later. And actually, if you notice, June 27th, this week in UK, there were a lot of these technical crop circles given. In the center of it, down at the, again, it's my screen left, but you can see that we're missing some detail, but that's the alien head, the icon. Furthermore, there's, the 4 lines coming out of it. You've got 1 large circle and 3 going, next to each other in a line. And so, from my studies, I've found that the aliens, they have skinny bob, they're, these 2 digits are merged into 1. And so you're seeing like, the control input in the center line. The larger bars on the outside of it, I usually just take as like a power system or the power bus. And then the more complex glyphs in the middle, I'm not going to get too far down into it, but they are, playing around with the neutrinos, the color change of the neutrinos. I guess the strong nuclear force may have some subtle aspect to it. Like, we have the 3 generations of electrons, electron, muon, and tauon. We also have, the neutrinos and their antiparticles changing colors, which I think, if you know anything about neutrinos, that we usually detect electron neutrinos and the other 2/3 are missing. Well, I think that's due to the fact that we're not seeing very many strong nuclear reactions coming out of the star. But yeah, so overall, the image, the architecture of the flight reactor, again, uses that monopole. They're quite fond, they being the crop circle makers, have used this, that geometry a couple times. I think it appeared first in 2001. So there is a continuity of imagery. It's not always linear, which we'll find out. So early on in my translating efforts, I would get out Google Sketch. You saw earlier a couple slides that was, putting a canvas into CAD. And by doing that, you can see that on the flight reactor, it does seem to want to line up, like the 2 halves want to fold into each other. Here on the bottom, the bar and the dot, that's them, the crop circle makers, playing 4-dimensional chess. Because if you ever go look at any of our power systems, you have, on and off is represented by a bar and a circle. As far as the fuel, like just recently on my searching, I came across a strange effect of berkelium. That apparently, if you measure the electron drift velocity, they're seeing a relativistic effect in berkelium, which is very, you have to, I guess, have a national security clearance and working in certain nuclear certified labs in order to gain access to it. But the takeaway I got off of berkelium was that apparently it's spinning, its valence electrons relativistically, so they appear to have more mass to them. So this circuit theory, this one, I'm going to skip forward real quick. So this one was quite interesting. It took 3 days for the crop circle makers to make it, but they gave themselves a little bit of space in between. If you can see, like the first part of it was what I would call the quadrant that again goes into the alien icon. There, it is icon is exactly the same as this logo on my shirt. And from there, it ended in the 5 circles here, which are that theme is all the way through this circuit theory design. I call it, there's line 1, line 2, 3, 4, and 5, as is represented by the number of circles at the beginning. Also, due to my study of linguistics and heuristics, if you think about how you read, let's take, English, for example, it's, left to right, top to bottom. So they seem to have done that, they've ordered this, the crop circle and that with that sort of orientation. But if you know anything about other languages like, Chinese, Japanese as well, I believe they read right to left, top to bottom. So they're reading in columns and such. And so for this one, sometimes I'll look at it and I'll start over on the far right in the corner, and you see you have like a staircase-like object. When you have these, there is a three-dimensional quality to these, and like some of the bars and dashes, you instead of seeing them planar, you want to put them at 90 degrees. Focusing in on this, you can see that fuel element is used. The fuel symbol is in this longer crop circle. It's in line 3 all the way to the far end. You can see there's these 3 dots. It goes out to like a T junction, and you have the bar and 3 dots. And then down further on line 4, I'm going to back up here. Line 4, you can see, there's this quite complex language of, I guess, particle interactions. Maybe we're seeing like, symbolic representations of like phonons and magnons, these virtual particles as the electric field is interacting and passing through the materials. In key to their thinking with the electric field is it's the wave particle duality plus polarization. And there's one symbol here in the 5th line that I'll see if I can highlight here in a bit, that when I saw that, it was like, oh, that's the wave particle duality. And plus they've got this little spiral on it. So, here I haven't gone through this in detail, and I've unfortunately lost some of my notes in the past, but when I'm looking at this and trying to, think up of designs, I'll break it down line by line. My recommendation for anybody that wants this sort of, that sort of information is to actually just get out some, pen and paper or a pencil, and then just break it down, do it as precise as you can. And it takes a little while to go through each one of the symbols. And after a while, I find that there's sort of like certain groups relate to each other. Obviously, like on line 1, you have this long waveform. And it's probably like, if I had to read it from right to left in this case, so you have this like, a waveform, and this capacitive coupling with this longer waveform. So what I've understood from, my experiences in seeing that, that the propulsion field is interacting with the electric field. So when we talk about 0-point energy, that's just the omnipresent electric field of the universe. So, when they're traveling interplanetary, they're most likely, the propulsion field must be spinning at, a higher velocity versus the vacuum of space-time. And when they come down into the atmosphere, the propulsion field is tuned and spinning at a lower speed because there's more particle density, more electric potential in the atmosphere than there is in the vacuum of space. But so, the line 1, like I said, sometimes I go from right to left or other times left to right. And so that stair-step structure with the little resonator, that I take as kind of like that whole area as a cross section of the hall, like you're looking at it 2D. And let me go so it's right side up. So sorry everybody if we, again, first line, now we're all the way over onto the the top right side. The stair step structure would be the hall structure, and then we have what looks like this large ball with a 90-degree angle on it going down into this structure beneath it, which we know within reality that matter and antimatter, there seems to be there's an abundance of matter. So, that's why we use the right hand rule. Antimatter uses the left hand rule. So if they're working with a strong nuclear force, some of the materials, they must be balancing that, playing around with that chirality between matter and antimatter and energetic reactions. So when my big takeaway from the fourth line is that you do have to read it from right to left, and that you'll get that basically the squiggles and lines and all that deal with how they are using the return energy from the propulsion field to go back into the fuel source and then regulate that energetic reaction. Here there again, if you know me, I grew up in Los Alamos, and I was up there as a kid during the time of Bob Lazar. So when he talked about EG and G, and have memories of the blue sign out, at the top of the hill when you're coming up. So some of my translation, that's always the problem with the translators. Who influenced you? And I ignored Bob Lazar for the longest time until after seeing the pair of flying saucers in 2010. So some of his, the element 115, I took it to heart. He was giving technical answers instead of all the mumbo jumbo. Everybody has an opinion to what the truth is, but for the sake of translation, if they are using the strong nuclear force, and then we're beginning to see these external field effects happen that he described within Berkeleum. So it's entirely possible that they're at the level of engineering where it's all inductive, right? You put in the fuel system, it's, the flight reactor can feel the gravitational energy in it, and then it starts, creating an ion eater down at the base of it. And then they, keep feeding the ion eater with a stream of hydrogen in order to get this matter-antimatter reaction at the heart of the vehicle. So the aliens, back to the overall view, and why this one, it's a quadrant. It's 1/4 of the vehicle. There may be some hidden connections in there that I haven't seen yet, but why I take it as being 1/4 of the vehicle is that sextant-like object on the far screen left, pointing out, it's coming out of the alien icon there. Now recently, like there's a pattern, dead in the middle of it that's, rectangles and such. And as I've delved more into metamaterials, I'm wondering if there's, maybe they're giving hints at how the hull is layered. So you have these negative refractive indexes, and or it's just something that they're putting a pretty geometric pattern in there in order to stimulate thought. So like I said, sometimes I'll spend nights just going over and reviewing and trying to draw stuff, and it's you get a stream of consciousness in the back of my mind. We'll talk about get into that in a moment here. So yeah, Paul Murad. It was funny that we talked about him so much, but when did I meet him? I got introduced to him via email, probably around 2014 or so. And then a little bit later, he found out that I really liked crop circles. So he said he sent this picture via email, and he's like, well, what do you think about that? So if we look at the circular one down on the bottom, and the inner elements, you can see that there are these five bars, these, swoosh, excuse me, my English is failing, but 5 objects that seem to be growing larger and larger. That design element is represented in the crop circle that appeared in 2009. This was, August 2nd, 2004. So here, like the aliens, like, Now there's some sort of four-dimensional chess that they're playing, because this to me, it looks like pulse width modulation and polarization, for a circular vehicle, and they're showing, the beginning of fourth wave mechanics. One of the design elements that appears frequently in the crop circles is like an asymmetrical series of circles. They're like pushing in one direction. So that design element, I don't think I have it highlighted, but it appears time and time again in their language. So they're playing around with these like field asymmetries in order to get the vehicle to go in a certain direction. And if we cross-reference what David Perez has done with his fractal array, and that it's not a pushing engine, it's more of a pulling engine. So I'll get into some math models here in a bit. So they're playing, this pulse width modulation at this point, and as this circle represents, would be like buoyancy. It's just neutral. It's not flying or moving in any one direction, and that they have, this double-sided waveform that's being swept through. It must have some sort of radial field array system within it, or kind of much like the bottom of the ARV, right? This capacitive array. This is one of the ones I've tried to study the most, or I've duplicated it in models, but this one to me was the little voice, the clairvoyant, says this was a capacitive array. It's a field emitting system. And then if you look at the glyphs in the middle, you see that there's three different types, and one of them repeats 6 times, and then you have the other two. It's like positive and negative on that. So it'd be like a 3-phase switch that is fed into this capacitive array, and that is probably at the equator of the vehicle. There's other interpretations of this, but that's from my perspective. And this also appeared in 2009, the summer of 2009. A lot of the crop circles related, they got very technical, which I've walked you through. Now this one also was in 2009, and it always screamed to me that it needed to be, it's a 3-dimensional object, and you're seeing, see if you can like see it rotating within your mind, but then folding in on itself. Here you see that, the dumbbell with the 2 dots on the outer side of it is very similar to the outer, the outer design, that capacitive array. As a matter of fact, the crop circle makers have used that overall geometry of the 2 circles connected by a line with the 2 line segments. It's a theme, and they do little variations upon it, and they come back to it again and again. Here I wanted to kick over into BLE, or some of the math models that I've done. At this time I was still at UNM. I used to have a nice MacBook, but this was made with Mac Grapher. And so around 2013, 2014, I started learning how to play with like parametric equations. And then just playing with the numbers, right? This graph, these spirals are called like lysojoules in pure mathematics. But once I found an interesting topology, I started to see that there was this like sort of inner field that was being generated. I'll pause. And early on in my UF research, I came across that an old website from the 90s called the Desert Rat, and they had Bill Uhouse on there talking about a flight simulator that they had supposedly built out in Area 51. And then he used the term gravity envelope, which I thought was very funny. And so what you're seeing within the model here, there's a central waveguide, and then they have a large sphere, and that would be like the flight reactor. And that it is the densest source of time and gravitational force within the vehicle. And so, what if I had to improve, or I want to improve this model based off of the stuff that I've worked with and learned from Mark on the Alzofon experiment, and that, the dynamic nuclear orientation that's happening in the Hall material has to be directed at the flight reactor, which is this, super dense element. And that, that's how they're getting, the inertial control, or the occupants within the vehicle, or within the gravity envelope. And since the Hall material is oriented towards that flight reactor, and the nuclear reaction that's occurring inside of it is the sense of time, it all just kind of came together cleanly in my mind back in 2014 when I started making these. And then last one is playing with the parametric equation. You can see that's, I'm trying to figure out how to have this like inward compressing, spiraling field effect. And, it's purely mathematics. It looks pretty. I think if I had to do it differently, I'd try to reverse the parameters of it so it came outward instead of compressing inwards. Let's see. So to bring it back to the crop circle language, and the pretty blue lines that were in the mathematical pictures, or that was how I was able to recreate that, or see this 2D design in 3D finally. And I do believe they are listening. We'll get into higher states of consciousness and here in a moment, but this one, like I said, if you'd been paying attention or seen me on previous APECs, back in June, I gave a presentation on the magnon, which I think is a really beautiful, concept. It's a spin wave within a material. It's what I've been learning with the Manelis device is that it's this clean energy system, and that it was doing thermal electric conversion within this conditioned ferrite block. And the conditioning of it basically entailed putting a magnetic toroid, and then learning to put a spin wave inside of that magnetic domain. And it's if you get it happening, the brick will get cold, and then you'll have within the column, you'll be able to levitate like a pin or a little piece of needle or metal. So the spin wave, to me, or this magnon concept, if taken out to the larger size, explains the spinning propulsion field effect that I've seen. And it's very faint in this crop circle, but if you study them for a while, you see that sometimes within the center, they'll have these smaller circles, and the wheat or the rapeseed or whatever, they like wheat twists together better, but you'll see that's braided. So they're able to create these quite complex spinning fields, or directed spinning fields of polarized electricity, and that create make these the elements of the crop spin together. And so over the years, thinking about it and trying to figure out how to actually turn that into like a useful engineering diagram. Well, what I did was I just borrowed from the FAA and looked into a systems diagram for like a private jet, and then from there just started changing some of the concepts. Flying saucers are round. Not all flying saucers or UFOs are round, but they seem to use spherical geometry, because it's the propulsion field is a spinning field on the outside of the craft, and spherical geometry leads to field leads to stability within the field. The propulsion and power system are very closely coupled. and that they are almost the same. The external spinning field has to feed back into the flight reactor in order to create the magnetic monopole or the overall field structure. What I've learned from talking with various professionals is that most likely the bottom of the vehicle is negatively charged, and then as you go towards the top center, it becomes increasingly positive. Again, this field topology, this polarization is very important to keep in mind when you're trying to design these things. So here's my new force database. So for this was my first sighting. I forget the gentleman's name that runs the website, but if there's anybody from NASA trying to collect data, like, this website is one of the best ones out there. So the interesting thing about this is that I had a premonitional dream. I usually don't talk too much about that, but it's probably like Thursday morning. The sighting happened on Saturday evening at 8:03. But in that Thursday morning dream, I just remember it was the early morning, and I had this dream vision of a large silver object floating over the trees and being able to see it quite clearly. And then I was like, woke up and, had a fleeting memory of it, but just forgot about it. And then 2 days later, standing out at O'Reilly's, so, when it happened, these two vehicles came in, they were checking out the local hospital. And in the first instant, it was, it looked like two objects, or I was like, what is that? Like a plane flying in? No. Was it like a helicopter exploding? No. Is it like two large birds being hassled by a flock of small birds? No, those are UFOs, flying saucers. The vehicles I could see that they were silver. They looked black underneath, but then there was like a white haze. And then as I was looking at the smaller objects, they all just, my coworker had this sequence. And while I was looking at them, this internal sign of the rainbow body went off, and I started having these like rainbow visuals or trailers and tracers going through my mind or through my visual consciousness. And so I had to ask him, I'm like, I'm seeing less. And he's like, yep. Like, I didn't see anything that flew off in random directions. He's like, nope. And now I just see like two of them. He's like, yep. So next thing I did was get on the phone and talk with Sir Charles Schultz. And I just was having like an OMG. Oh my God, I'm seeing stuff. He's like, yes, Aidan, what is it? I'm like, UFOs. It was quite exciting because when you see it, it's, for your first time, and that you're seeing something, there's an energetic reaction. But so the interesting thing though is that premonitional dream. Oh, it's not in here. I was going to reference Julia. There it is. So Julia's discussion was quite interesting for me because, over the years, I've had some sort of premonitional dreams. Kind of always have maybe a year's heads up. The more I meditate and the more I do, normal work, hard work, the visions become a little bit stronger. Sometimes they're really annoying, but it comes from, years of practice. About 20 years ago, I met a modern master of the mystical arts, and in classes with him, he would start talking about 0-point energy and the time that he built a UFO. And meanwhile, he's giving out, teachings on how to still the mind. Through some of the techniques he gave me, it was a lot of stillness meditation, but in order to pacify your small mind, your ego, you use things like mantra in order to get the chemical reactions that are going on. And then you learn how to go into, your dream states, or, if anybody's ever used psychedelics and taken a time out and looked inside, sometimes you'll get all sorts of flashes or quite intricate patterns. So I learned to go into that state of consciousness without using psychedelics, and would go up to the monastery. where I have experienced with monks like telepathy or communication and via dreams. So there is this aspect of your consciousness that, as you're alive and the electrons are coursing through your body, you're bioluminescent. It's very faint, but your body is creating a sort of a light. And so if there is this ability, there seems to be this premonitional ability, of light predicting or knowing what it's going to do before it's going to do it. And, that we can go off into prophecy and such. But so with learning this language, and if anybody wants to, pick this up as well, the idea is just to go through and trace out some of the designs, spend the time doing it by hand with paper or something that's going to get your mind into that focus state where you're drawing for a while. There is a language that they put into those circles, those teachings, and it does seem to have, I always come back to those, and it's, oh, that one's a flight reactor. And I had come across that via Jason Brabelli. And then that summer I went over, so this is my first UFO conference, at the Roswell one. There was this wonderful lady, Patty Greer, no relation to Stephen Greer, but she picked out a couple of these as well. And without me saying anything to her, I was just in the crowd. She's like, oh, and this one pertains to a power system. And this one seems to be some sort of complex engineering language that nobody has really seemed to be working at. And from there, I was like, oh, aha, I seem to be, at least somebody else has the same madness as I do. And I just want to point out this one little, so in Vajrayana Buddhism, they have this teaching, it's called Nam Cho. Cho, Nam means space and Cho means treasure. So it's like space treasure, but this cryptic looking glyph, the one little object that I want to call everybody's attention to is this funny circle with the 4 dots and the 3 landing legs. And that to me always seems to scream like that's a flying saucer with its landing gear down. For personal reasons, I read this one from right to left, and it's just, the more I look at it, it's a pretty picture, offering advice on the path. But so it seems like some of these teachers, enlightened teachers from centuries past, had premonitional glimpses of civilizations elsewhere. So and I think with that I'm kind of done, and I'm open to questions. Or
awesome. Okay, Aidan, let's do this. Let me stop your screen share. Oh, there we go. Hey, everybody, I'm going to put this thing on gallery view. Everybody, please give Aidan a tremendous applause. Mr. Aidan Shaffer. Aidan has been among us for many, many years now. 2 years now. And
yeah,
2 years now. That's many, many in APEC years. So, which are like dog years, right?
Right. Yeah. So
Okay.
don't tell me I've aged 14 additional years now, but
yeah, I know. I know. Well, Aidan, maybe, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but maybe the audience, you guys do too. For some reason, this September, right? And I had a weird vibe too, going back to this summer. This summer it was pretty mellow, and I had this weird vibe. This fall it's going to be busy. It has been insane. It's just been this knockdown drag out. I mean, it's been like twice as busy at work, the whole 9 yards. So let me see. Let me go to Bill Alec first. Bill, go for it, sir.
Yeah, Aidan.
Yep.
Yeah, you brought up crop circles, and I'm wondering if you mentioned that there could be some sort of an engineering language by these ETs. If and I was doing some research here with the German saucer program, before World War II. And there was some channeling done by this Maria Orsic, and she mentioned that these ETs would communicate in an ancient Sumerian language.
Okay.
Wondering if there could be a connection between the Sumerian ancient alphabet and maybe these crop circles.
I'm not familiar with the Sumerian language, so that's a new one on me. But like when I was working on the fuel system, I went into like looking at the Aztec or Mayan. I think Mayan system accounting uses bars and dots, and like a bar means 5. And so in my first couple interpretations, I was looking at the number 13. If I go back to the slide like that, the bar and 3 dots with the circle, if they're using any sort of, like I'm looking for interaction and insight now in my day and age, but that's the hieroglyphics, Del the Funky Homo Sapiens little, like his glyph for his band. So I don't want to copyright infringe, but that fuel element symbol that's the only other place I've seen it. So the direct question is, I don't know, or direct answer to the Sumerian connection is, I don't know. I have, to my credit, I think I've seen nearly 50 vehicles in the Albuquerque skies. Sometimes, there's a weird, one day in 2014, there was a flap of 10 vehicles that came over Albuquerque. And then about a month later, here we're going into a spiritual experience. Towards the end of the semester, I just all of a sudden in the afternoon got really tired and went to the room that I was renting, and immediately, like, I got on my cot and like immediately was like passed out. But then I was in the intermediate state of, a visionary state, and there was this little short guy with big, wide eyes that wrapped around, super buff. I don't know how many fingers or whatnot, but not a big head, but short and wide eyes. And we were having some sort of detailed discussion. And then I remember waking up and then looking down at my leg, and there was this ghostly white box with this straight rod coming down into my shin. And, through the years that I've spent doing meditation, and I know there is a spiritual realm, there is consciousness, and some things, there's a medium for, sharing information through your visual consciousness, both exterior and interior. But, that was just one of those really weird ones. So, but yeah, I don't know much about the Sumerians. So, Boyd, Michael Boyd.
Mr. Boyd.
Hey, Aidan, I got a question. Some of those crop circles I saw what look like being metamaterial surfaces. And I'm curious if have you ever seen this book before, the metamaterial book?
I can't see your, I do have a metamaterial textbook. Now, I know Mark has gotten a couple. I can't see, where is your, yeah, there you are. Let me see. Yeah, I have that one. Yep.
Okay, so as far as those being a clue to lift or torsion fields, that kind of stuff, I'd suggest you look at chapter 14.
Okay.
Which is on page 377.
77.
And while you're finding it, I'm going to read you this this paragraph on the first page of this section. It says, since magnetic conducting surfaces do not exist naturally, it is necessary to artificially create a surface with magnetic conduction properties in a certain band of frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
This can be achieved by utilizing resonant inclusions on a non-conducting host substrate layer in parallel with a conducting ground plane. Near the resonance of the inclusion, strong currents are induced on the surface, and together with the conducting ground plane, this structure may provide an equivalent magnetic conductor for a frequency range corresponding to the frequency range in the vicinity of a resonance of the surface.
Right, so these are, yes,
So
frequency.
now,
selective
if you go over the next few pages and look at those surfaces, what they look like, just go through them. They have this piano and Hilbert curve elements are called. And look
Right.
at shapes there. They look just like some of those shapes that were showing up in those crop circles. And if you look at, like, go to 383, where they have the piano surface, and you can see it's like a whole surface set. And then another good example of it is on page 387, where they have the Hilbert surfaces.
Right.
See that? So perhaps it is a clue.
Yeah. I mean, I have my take on arts parts and, like, you know, the materials, what they're doing within there, you know, playing with the bismuth is on the inside, it's facing towards the inside of the vehicle. And then they're playing around with zinc and magnesium and layering that. And that there's the ratio between the thin layer of magnesium and the thicker layer of magnesium that's
What's the substrate material? Do you have any idea?
it's that arts parts that's floated around, the funny striated thing. I don't
Okay.
have.
The supposed sample that
Yeah, so like when you're looking at it,
Academy, that one.
yeah, we like drew from Florida. We
Right.
had a good discussion about that a couple APECs ago. It's that, you know, Linda Moulton Howell had it for a bit, and then it went off to, I guess, the Army through TTSA. But that the material, like, it's not as complex. It's, you know, it's been flown, so the little substriations in it are a result of it flying and doing possibly like the spacefold jump. Like I alluded to in the circuit theory design, my belief is that they're playing around with the electron generations in order to get some superluminal movement, like when they do the spacefold, that they're loading the electric field down to the muon or up to the muon level, and then that increased energy density with muons gives them the ability to skip, you know, for as long as the field is stable. So that's why you see them.
Muons are 207 times heavier than an electron.
The muons, yeah, no, they're like 500.
They have more inertial energy than an electron would have.
Right. And then, you know, everything that I've learned about them is that, you know, they were constantly being bombarded by muons, and that they're moving through space-time greater distances than their half-life should allow them to move. So
well, in any case, I just thought you might be interested in seeing that part of the book, because it's kind of.
Yeah, you're reminding me I need to do some more reading and get back to Jersey.
Well, that's a hard book to read. It took me a while.
No, it's not. I've been around PhD level people most of my life living in New Mexico. So even though I don't have a master's, I have done some of the hiking through calculus. But yeah, that design I've actually played around with, and I have a CAD design, but it's similar. So John Brandenburg, yeah, sorry to.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, John, go for it, sir. Oh, you're muted. Let me see. There, ask to unmute. There we go. And lower hand.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I really enjoyed your talk. I just wanted to amplify your comments. First of all, on the Mayan, apparently Mayan symbols for the number 8 and 13 appeared several times.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's pretty interesting right there, because we don't, you know, we know the Mayans were very sophisticated and were in contact with a lot of people they didn't talk about, especially the priesthood. And but also your rotating electromagnetic field, the three-phase, which is, Tesla three-phase, that comes up very prominently in my own work on gravity modification. That is as a practical matter, that's the best way to make gravity modification, is set up rotating fields around your craft. That's why many of the craft, in my interpretation, have 3 bumps on the bottom. That's fairly frequent.
Yeah.
Thing that, yes.
There was it was like a 1966 sighting in New Mexico, and I wish I had snaked the or kept the pictures, but it is a classic saucer. It's got 3 bumps on the bottom. It's got that central waveguide. Looks like a top hat, and it does. This guy got a sequence of it, and it's there. And then the next one is you see the bottom. It's done that like
very good
rotation, and it's going to switch over.
I'd love to see pictures of that.
It's a classic. It's the guy. It's a 1966 New Mexico UFO sighting. There's that turquoise step side, rusted old pickup truck that's in it. And then
1966 New Mexico.
Rio Doso, maybe Rio Doso, New Mexico.
Rio Doso,
maybe, but it's definitely was in New Mexico.
I used to live in New Mexico. It's a beautiful place. Still a lot of friends there. I worked at Sandia Labs in Albuquerque. And
you're a Sandian.
Yes, I was for about 3 years, and it was a quite extraordinary experience, especially because it's a nuclear weapons lab. Even though I wasn't working on nuclear weapons, I was working on controlled fusion and directed energy weapons. And we went through the Able Archer 83 crisis there, which was a secret crisis where we came as close to a nuclear war as we did during the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it was all secret, except people like us at the lab. And so that was a very eye-opening experiment. It got me very interested in finding a dead civilization on Mars. I thought we need something to get us out of this jam here on Earth. And the best thing to do is distraction. So anyway, I really enjoyed your talk. Thank you very much. Beautiful pictures. And I write science fiction. I treat the UFO problem in terms of science fiction.
I'm aware.
Under the pen name Victor Norgard. And so I kind of got the okay to put stuff I'd heard when I was working in DC into science fiction. They said, just so long as it's labeled science fiction, John. So we won't have any objection to you publishing things you heard around the coffee machine.
Right.
Some places I work.
Changing here.
What's that?
The whole tone of the conversation's changing, but they're, if you look into modern or what the UFO Twitter stuff, they're New York Times coming out and it's the Chinese drones now.
Oh, that's preposterous.
Yeah, I know. The stuff I've seen is not from China. So
the heroine in my novel, who's Asian American, her name is Cassandra Chen. She says the great unindicted co-conspirator in the UFO cover-up is the American public itself.
Yeah,
because they don't want to know what's going on. They're too frightened by it, and so they believe very. They just have infinite credulity when the government speaks on UFOs, even if they don't believe them when they say anything else. So it's a psychological thing. So
it's keeping the blanket on people so they're not worried about it.
Well said. But Eddie, thank you for your talk. It was very interesting. And yes, I see, some of the Mayan numbers in there. We wonder, are these really Mayan numbers, or did they get them from somebody else?
Right.
And also, but the three-phase rotating fields, that's a very important thing, and it just fell right out of
Yeah, gravity
Gem
is
theory.
spin. That's something that's been taken out of our Newtonian mechanics, is the fact that like anything that's generating a gravitational field is spinning. Like,
Is spinning, yes.
so you take the wave particle duality plus field polarization as your electromagnetic force fundamentals, and then gravity, the gravitational force, starts things spinning, which may just be based off of the strong nuclear force. But
Well, if you believe that the forces are all deeply connected, the two long range forces of nature are, of course, gravity and E&M.
mhm.
And but apparently if you go down deeper to shorter length scales, then the strong and the weak forces begin to play. Jack would have something to say about this.
I got Jared with the, I know.
Yeah,
I got,
How
let me
about
go-
we give a little update on what's going on here at the lab? We're just about ready to run the.
not quite yet. Not quite yet. Let me go to Jared, and then we can do it.
Then I
Okay.
think Jack Sarfati should say something.
I know, I want to hear what he's got to say.
No, please let Jack go ahead of me.
Let the wolf man speak.
Okay.
All right, do you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hang on, Jared.
let me say a few things. I found your talk actually very interesting because you're an experiencer and you're channeling information. So this is a
Yes.
code. I do agree that the crop circles are transmissions, and you're one of, you're one of the experiences that perhaps, with your intuitive artistic mind, you coming up with some interesting things. But this is the high strangeness part. Now I'm coming from, right now I'm wearing my PhD physics hat, okay? From an from my professors who built the atomic bomb, okay? and
I got one of those hats too.
yeah, but seriously, now when you say that in order to generate the propulsion, the thing has to spin, no, it doesn't have to spin. However, I mean, it depends what you mean by spin. It doesn't have to be a mechanical rotation.
No.
Okay.
No, it's a, I've seen optical.
Oh, well,
cloaks
just let me
by-
finish. I don't interrupt. I have a coherent thought here. Okay, so it's like, and you cannot anticipate it, believe me, because you don't have the education in the field. The thing is that with metamaterials, it's as if something is spinning when you're time modulating, like the electrical permittivity of the metamaterial and other electrical and magnetic parameters of material. Like they're doing these experiments with the so-called Fizzo experiment. It's as if the metamaterial is moving very fast, but it's not moving at all. It's just that the way you're modulating the parameters of the material, it simulates actual motion. So it may be correct that sometimes when they see the UFO and it seems to be spinning, it's not really mechanically spinning. It's optically. It looks like as though it's spinning because of
I agree.
this
Yeah.
Fields.
parametric. Let's call it parametric modulation effect inside the metamaterial will produce an effective spin. It's spin without spin. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, very good.
All right.
If
So,
I- if I
and
may,
all right. So that's all. So that's all I want to. Oh, and in general, remember, from my point of view, the physics involved is extremely simple and elementary. It's so elementary that in the say in the 1960s, when Richard Feynman hung out with to some extent at Caltech in the 60s, late 60s, when at that time he could have had as an oral examination a PhD graduate student at Caltech in the 1960s. He could have asked certain questions, and everything I'm talking about, the theory of how the flying saucers work, would have been so obvious to these guys. It's an immediate, obvious application of standard physics, Einstein's general theory of relativity, and some quantum mechanics. Of course, at that time, nobody would even talk about UFOs, and I don't know whether Feynman and some of these people really knew because it's connected with Sagan, but the point is that basically Einstein's field equation of general relativity, 1916, you could think of it like Ohm's law. It's analogous to electrical circuit, the Ohm's law, where the induced current is the applied voltage divided by the resistance, right? Okay, so the induced current is basically analogous to the induced gravitational or the warp field, all right? The voltage is like the stress energy tensor, and the 1 over the resistance is like G over C to the fourth. It's just the coupling that's in Einstein's field equation. So that's, so that's basically it. So the thing is, what you, in using those metaphor, that analogy, the idea is to create the effective resistance of space-time to being bent, to make that resistance very small, just like you make the resistance small to form a superconductor, electrical superconductor. So the electrical engineering analogy to general relativity is, I think, should be very useful for electrical engineers, in which, like, in general, then you have complex impedance, right, in circuits. So you replace just the resistance, now has a complex impedance with induction effects, capacitor, right, all that. And the same thing's happening in Einstein's theory, because it turns out,
Tim, we're about to run the Podkletnov impulse experiment. If you guys
all
follow
Oh, yeah,
along.
but we also have to hear from Jared.
Wait, let me just finish.
I mean, we have liquid nitrogen pouring here. It's already been poured.
All right, so what? So what?
We have to hear from Jared too.
So what? That's not anti-gravity. You're not getting anti-gravity.
Okay. So you don't have to watch. No problem.
All right, now it's not a question of watching. We're talking now about we're talking about understanding the whole damn phenomenon, and then you interject with some cockamamie thing with the. What are you going to make ice cream with that? With the liquid nitrogen? My father used to have liquid nitrogen. No, he had. They can make ice cream with that.
I want liquid nitrogen ice cream.
I know.
All right, maybe can we?
Okay, yeah, we
hey,
got it.
All right,
Jared has been waiting patiently, Jack, while you've been talking. So we.
all right.
we have
Okay,
to
but
talk.
so what are you going to show us? What's the liquid nitrogen going to do?
Okay, so let's
Can we
go.
please watch
Let's do this,
Go
Jared.
ahead.
Jared, let me put your hand down.
Yes.
Let me go to let me put Mark on. So let me remove the spotlight there from Aidan. Let me go.